everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the Dirty Chats podcast. I'm Sara, your host, and I am so excited to finally be releasing this project and to finally have the opportunity to yap in your ears, which has been a long time coming. So, firstly, thank you so much for being here. I am so thankful for anyone listening because who am I to be doing this? But here we are. And I thought today would be a great opportunity to kind of get to know myself and how this project is born and give a bit of context into what to expect from the Dirty Chats podcast. So, I guess there are a lot of things about me that will kind of naturally come up as I intertwine some solo episodes with some interview episodes with some really cool women that I've already got lined up. And the idea behind this all is to really openly share what many of us are going through in different life paths, in different journeys, to really normalize all of the feelings that come with it and all of the experiences that as women we navigate. I have a feeling that it's a common thread amongst many women of what we thought our 30s would look like, and then that being a complete different reality. If there's anything I want you to get out of the Dirty 30 Chats podcast, is kindness and compassion to yourself, no matter where you are at in your journey. I feel like we can be our own worst critics and literally our worst enemies. And so I personally find that when I'm navigating something personally and I hear someone going through something similar, or maybe even they're more advanced in age and therefore have accrued a bit more life experience, and hearing these stories always helps me tone down that inner critic, gain perspective, and with that comes a bit of kindness and compassion with oneself. I naturally am drawn to having deep conversations. I love to share, probably an oversharer, someone who can't hide their emotions, so it's quite visible when something's going on in my life. And I just think that's the beauty in life, to share, to connect, to support one another. And because I already do that in my day to day, and I find myself having so many conversations with people, and a lot of them women, going through their own shit. And then it's that ongoing feeling of like, oh, why me? And it's not necessarily that that's a victim mindset, but often we just drag so much over our shoulders that by the time the next thing hits, you're like, oh my gosh, cut me some slack. And look, maybe I'm talking just firsthand because that's been my recent experience, but I know I'm not alone. And so I'm here to talk about the myths, the highs, the lows, the awkward, the fun, the transformative, everything that we go through in the most open and vulnerable way with women. And we are gifted, I guess, that natural way of coming together, of community, of connection, of sisterhood. And I naturally tend to build that in my relationships because that's how I like to relate with my friends. And I just think it's one of the biggest blessings in my life to have that village behind that, cheerleads and supports and hugs and cries with you as you go. So, despite this being a digital format, I really hope that by listening to the podcast, you can gain a bit of that feeling. So, enough ranting about that. There's going to be a great lineup of women who are navigating life and who have been willing to share the ebbs and flows and what they've learnt from their 30s and what led to certain circumstances or events happening in their life, from breakups to marriage to motherhood to choosing not to become a mom to natural health, female health, fertility, all those topics. And alongside that, there's also the element of career and ambition and personal goals and self growth that often may collide when pursuing one thing or the other. And so in my chats, I try to bring a bit of everything into one quite a holistic picture where we're not just focusing on the one negative event that happened, but all of the other things around it. And again, what we take from that experience. I think it's an exercise of self reflection that is so empowering for one to even realize how far you've come and what you've learned, but also feeling like your story could actually help the next person feel a little bit less heavy, less low in their mood as they navigate something similar. I guess the best way to start giving context as to how we get to today and recording this podcast is almost rewinding a little bit earlier to the start of 2025. I was about to turn 33. I'm an Aquarius, born the 12th of February. And I guess I was feeling a sense of groundedness and independence that I had heard other women talk about in their 30s. I felt like all the seeds I planted these 3 years leading up to my 33rd lap around the sun were really starting to blossom and fruit. And I was feeling so good with myself, so independent, so confident, very much in a whatever mindset and very present. I was working in marketing and I had a long term partner and we had a dog together and life was cool. It was fun. Everything was good. And there was really cool things to look forward to, including a 2 week trip over east. At the time, I was based in Margaret River in Western Australia. So the other end of Australia, with friends as a surprise birthday gift for my now ex-partner. And I love the East Coast. So I was so excited for some tropical weather and, baby waves to surf in, whatnot. That didn't end up happening, FYI. Anyway, so with that, and then in June or May, June, flying to Spain, where I'm originally from, to celebrate my sister's wedding. My little sister was getting married. So, a lot of good things to look forward to. I guess I had a few concerns, let's say. I'm probably going to call them pings, and I'll explain more on this in a different episode. And I didn't really read much more into it. Work was okay. I didn't love it, but it gave me a lot of flexibility. I worked remotely from home. I could work from Spain when I traveled to Spain. So it felt like it really gave me that sense of freedom that I thrive in. Also, just living in a small town in Margaret River, that's really the only way to really pursue a career. And it really felt like I was ticking off the boxes. That was work. Then, in terms of our relationship, we had a bit of a tumultuous end to 2024 due to there being mold in our previous rental where we lived for almost 3 years. And it had been affecting my health all the way from August 2024 to about November 2024. I knew I was getting sick from mold. I was having very crazy, bizarre symptoms. And I will save all of that story for another episode too, because there's a lot of juiciness to come out of that. And honestly, mold is just one of the things that it's probably making so many people sick, but people just think that a bit of bleach and vinegar will do. It won't. Anyway, that's another story for another day. And so, what happened was that I was coming into this sense of independence and really feeling like I need to get out of this house. I need to start treatment. I need to start detoxing and paying all this money through a naturopath. And it just really needs to feel like it's worth it. I can't continue living in this space. But that meant I was going to move out alone because my partner and I had different interests and we were just clashing heads and we weren't coming to an agreement there. So I guess that's really when I can see myself really reclaiming that gut feeling and that intuition that I guess I had had dormant for a good chunk of years. And it really came like a very clear message where I just knew what I had to do. And it was kind of stepping a bit away from the norm of, well, you're in a long-term relationship in your 30s, you're meant to live together. How are you then going to operate this? You're going to live separate, but you're still together. And so I left our rental with not really having a plan, but relying on his family's holiday home and really figuring things out as they went, as they happened. And the moment I decided that, within 2 weeks, I had put a bit of feelers out around house sitting and pet sitting in the region. And within those 2 weeks, I had kind of booked my calendar of house sits until end of February, March. And this is November 2024. So one removal of a block, like something making me sick, and a house that I just felt like I was feeling trapped in because I no longer wanted to be in this space, and removing that and really listening to my gut, then there was like a world of possibilities opening up on the other end. So I guess that's where I now, in retrospective, can reflect and be like, okay, I was really starting to carve my own solo path for the events that were going to unfold later this year. More on that now. Let's fast forward back into 2025, where I'm living by myself in these house sits and really enjoying it. Like, for the first time in years, I could really operate and flow in a beautiful home because all of them were just amazing, a literal upgrade from where I was living. And really realizing the need I had for my own space, for my own routine, for the quietness that came with it, and still being in a relationship with my partner. And really, we navigated that amazingly. It was really, really good. And I think we both really benefited from that space. But what I didn't realize was that by choosing that separation for our own well-being and our different interests, we were kind of drifting away, combined with a few other personal topics that were causing that disconnection between us. That's not something I realized fully at the time, and I only really got to that conclusion months later. Comes April 2025, and we find a beautiful rental. And it literally felt like something I manifested. It had the polished concrete floors and beautiful light, and it was small, very easy to clean, surrounded by bush, perfect for everyone, literally. And it just became my little sacred healing space. Or little did I know that that was what it was going to become. And so, yeah, we move in there, and then I flew to Spain within a month from moving to the house. That trip to Spain was just beautiful in so many ways. Firstly, because my sister was getting married, and so there was all this high energy around it and celebrations and time with family. And I really came back to Australia feeling like that's been the best trip back home ever. In the 7 years, almost 7 years, I would have lived in Australia by then. I felt so connected and grounded and really at home again here in Spain. And so, yeah, I came back really recharged. But it was in that trip where my concerns around the relationship really started to come out. And I guess it was one of those things that you kind of observe other people's dynamics. You have really dear people to you, about to get married, having had just a baby, really doing the whole tick off things off the adulting list and feeling so much joy for them, but constantly feeling like a level of comparison with where I was and where my relationship was and what I was receiving from that relationship. And my gosh, my brain was nonstop overthinking. And yeah, the questions were so loud. Is this it? Is this who's going to be the dad to my children? Is he going to be my husband? And the craziest thing of it all is that I loved this guy so freaking much that up until a month before all of this happens, I literally had journal entries expressing, a desire for potentially getting engaged in the trip to Spain that was about to happen for my sister's wedding. His family was going to be here, our families were going to be together. It was a destination wedding in Portugal, and the whole thing just felt like, oh my God, this would be so cool. And yeah, literally weeks before the wedding, my brain is going and just feeling so, so anxious and so torn that I couldn't even voice this to anyone. I felt trapped in my thoughts, in my emotions. And the one thing that helped me was going into Spotify podcasts and literally typing in break up in your 30s, becoming single at 30, like just the most bizarre searches that felt so overwhelming to even be putting that out there and then getting recommendations for things like that. And yeah, I guess I felt ashamed and I felt very fearful of what people were going to say and of what my future was going to look like. Because who becomes single at 33 and who decides to break up a relationship just because it doesn't feel right anymore? That's what my brain was thinking. And so all I needed to hear was there are so many people going through this too. But they were just not in my surroundings. So I guess that gives a bit of insight as to how we land here today and how the Dirty 30 Chats podcast was born, which I'll talk about more now. So by the time we celebrate the wedding, we have all the fun, amazing weekend, the best weekend of my life. I then flew back to Australia and we still had a few social commitments and things happening with work that kept me very busy. So all those thoughts and doubts were just pushed to the side. Don't think about that anymore. Enjoy what you have. Don't even read into it anymore, like just go with it. And yeah, by the time all of those events happened, we're in late July, we finally come back to our rental. And, since May that I had left, a lot of months, a lot of movement, a lot of things going on, I really hadn't had the stillness to really think and really let my emotions and my thoughts sink in. And so the moment I found that stillness, the anxiety was just eating me alive. And I remember having a chat with a girlfriend who's had similar relationship issues and has also been in a quite a long-term relationship. And I found myself asking her questions that I was literally asking myself. Do you ever think about breaking up? What would happen if you break up? What would you do? And she was very sure of wanting to stay in the relationship, but I was completely torn. And within days from that, I had booked a appointment with my psych, and I was really hoping she was going to tell me, Sarah, you're all good. You guys are good. Stay where you are. Just do a bit of therapy together. And the night before, I had a full mental breakdown, and I just knew. I just knew I had to leave this relationship as much as I loved this guy and the life we had built together was just amazing. And I just could no longer see a future together. So, if you remember what I just said about the mold and that gut feeling that I had to follow, and then things happening consequently, this was the second part to that. The moment I decided to leave the relationship and it turned out to be a very mutual agreement, a lot of the things I was voicing, he was also feeling. And it was just the most beautiful night we spent together saying goodbye, as heartbreaking as it was, and really just cherishing our life together and knowing that we want to have each other in our lives for as much as we can because we have become like family. And I just, in my head, I was like, okay, you've done the hardest bit, that's done. We'd agreed I'd keep the rental, and I was very happy to sacrifice a good chunk of my salary to live alone in this little peaceful oasis I'd found myself in, and just finding so much joy in having that space. And within a month of literally breaking up, I then find myself kind of getting pushed out of my job. The shock to the system was insane. I literally felt like I'm living the diary of Bridget Jones 4.0, 5.0, I'm not really sure. So from that point on, my brain enters survival mode. I could just feel things kind of pushing me to my limits at a point where I was already very emotional. And I had felt very strong in that initial month from the breakup, in the sense of I trust that things are going to work out. But then I was getting all these tests beyond my control that they were really, really making me question everything. So, a big summary of that following month was I decide to quit my job. I decide to leave my rental. I decide to sell my car and say goodbye to the most amazing community of friends and extended family now that I'd built for the past 6 years and that had become such a core part of me. But I knew I had created enough of a foundation to continue having these relationships in my life. I just felt like I was going to suffocate in this little town where I was now finding myself without job, without a house, without a partner, without my dog. And so I decided to book a one-way trip to Spain, to mum and dad's, where I am recording this podcast from, and really take a time to reset, to regroup, to recalibrate, to really have the mental space to think, what do I want to do? What am I supposed to be doing in this chapter of my life? Because as a ADHDer who runs a million times an hour internally and sometimes externally, as you'll probably hear sometimes when I've got the turbo mode on, I felt exhausted. I felt like I just wanted to be taken care of. And I also knew I had to freeze my spending somehow when, the longer I stayed in Australia, I would have to pay for rent and groceries and petrol and life. And coming to mum and dad's, I could kind of put that on hold. Thankfully, I do have an amazing, supportive family and really give myself the gift of time, which is what I really felt like I needed. So in that time frame, when I originally had the idea of the Dirty 30 Chats podcast, thanks to my friend Jamie, I thought it was going to be mostly about relationships because, again, my brain was like, not many people break up long term relationships in their 30s. And if they do, it's not really out there. And if there's one thing that's helped me see things more optimistically, is listening to these stories. But when the rest unfolded, I was like, oh my God, what is going on? What the fuck is going on? I laughed more than I cried. Trust me, by that point, I felt like this is a joke. Are you kidding me? In 2 months' time, buy boyfriend, buy house, buy dog, buy stability, buy security, buy home, buy friends, buy everything that I'd built for 6 years. I could have stayed, but it would have really, really affected my nervous system and my mental health. It would have been really challenging to continue sustaining this. And I just knew. So that's where the Dirty 30 Chats podcast was born. The Dirty 30 concept was something that I've used so often to celebrate someone's 30th birthday. And I've kind of used the Dirty 30 as a fun and flirty thing. But then I was like, this is literally the messy middle. It's what some of us experience, but it's definitely not a majority. And that does bring a feeling of loneliness. So if you find yourself navigating something similar, whether you're in your 30s, your 20s, or your 40s, or 60s, I don't care. This is just me saying you are not alone. And the biggest thing I immediately felt that I could take from this experience was really embracing the impermanence of things. I'm not really a control freak. I do like to plan certain things of my life, but I'm also happiest when I let things flow. And I guess I always struggle juggling that flowiness, with the rational, controlling mindset, as many of us do. But when all of these things that you anchor your security and your foundation to were really being swept from under my feet, that was the biggest lesson. You literally can't control anything happening in your life, no matter how much you try and fix it and secure it to the ground. If it's not meant to be, there will be signs. And so those were mine. So I am finally telling this story 3 months after the breakup and feeling so much more calm, really embracing, being unemployed, not in a relationship, being taken care of by mum and dad, and just having a plate of food on my table that mum's cooked for me. And I'm in charge of the dishes, don't you worry, I do my bit. But I needed this because I run on such a masculine energy all of the time that this is the years of burnout and grinding and so much anxiety and so much worry about the future that it's taken all of these events to happen so close in time all at once to really shake me and wake me up. And I guess I just need to pour all of this inspiration that's coming to me in hopes to just help anybody, a human who is navigating the messy middle in any kind of way. Now, like I was saying at the beginning, I love my deep chats with women. So I do I do intend to bring mostly women to this chat, and I can't wait to share all of the girls that I've got already lined up and recorded and ready to go, from all different life paths. Because just even listening to that story helps me gain perspective and understanding of the different paths and routes that our lives can take the moment we just flow with the river that life is. Really accepting that there's no end goal. You're not meant to tick a box by X age. You're not meant to even be doing anything unless you want to. So I feel like 2025 really, really helped me anchor into that thinking pattern, I guess. And I know from experience and from chatting to many friends that letting go of control isn't easy. We all like to know a bit of what's happening and what's about to happen, and just make sure that everything's going to be fine because no one wants to go through the ugliness of life. But the earlier we accept that, the better it will be. And the more perspective and insight we have as to the possible outcomes that could happen to us one day. You know, with many of the women that I speak about at this point in time, there's a recurring thread on motherhood and parenting. And with that comes fertility. None of us have guaranteed that we are fertile humans and that we will be able to conceive naturally and have a baby. However, we are raised thinking, how many kids do you want to have? And, what gender do you want to have? What if the day I decide to try and conceive, I can't? I want to open my mind to possibilities like what would happen if X. It's not to say it will happen, it's just perspective. And that is precisely why I want to chat all things life as a woman at this decade, where it does feel like a lot of our decisions are quite more long term. There's buying a house, and there's career goals, and there's motherhood, and there's fertility, and health issues, and autoimmune conditions, and all these things that kind of feel like come all at once the moment we enter into this decade. And, for some, it might have been earlier. That's totally fine. But the point is, it does feel like a point in time where these decisions suddenly are way more solid than maybe in our 20s when everything was a bit more lightweight. And the general feeling of all my eggs are in this basket, or at least that's my perception from chats with people where change feels way more scary and daunting. And as someone who has changed jobs, countries, houses, and a few partners, not that many, but all the rest, a lot of times I know exactly how that feels. And even making all the decisions I made throughout this year that I've explained in my story today did feel so scary. And it's only now in retrospective that I can talk about them with much more clarity and calmness around it. And if you can take anything out of this podcast today, it's that no matter where you're at in life, that you feel confident and that you feel empowered in trusting your gut, whatever it is that it's telling you. And just know that things do work out at the end. And you might have to go through a bit of a rock bottom. Hello, unemployment, back at mum and dad's, no current future plans of anything. But it's okay. And it can feel good. And when you really surrender into that experience, it might even be some of the best months of your life. And I'm just saying this because, maybe it's a pep talk to myself, but I genuinely feel like this time is giving me such a gift that I'm not really sure what it is now. Number one probably is a nervous system reset, but I think there's going to be so much goodness to come out of this stillness. So, not saying that you have to repeat my steps. The main point here is just follow your gut. Your body will tell you and guide you. So, I think I've yapped on for long enough to really give context as to the recent events that lead to today. And I want to share as vulnerably as I can in hopes again that people can really relate. I want to bring relatable stories, those that are more taboo, those that need to be unfiltered, because we need to talk about what's going on in our lives to really help others. So I'll wrap it up here. I want to say a huge, 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 huge thank you if you've listened up until now. I will be releasing weekly episodes for the foreseeable future, and I hope you enjoy. Stay tuned for the episodes to come.